The wind howled across the open plains, tugging at Amelia Bradshaw's bonnet as the stagecoach rumbled westward. She clutched a small valise close to her chest, the only belongings she had left after fleeing the life she'd once believed would bring her salvation. Her hands trembled slightly, not from the chill in the air, but from the memory of the man she'd just left behind. 2 months earlier, Amelia had answered an advertisement in a Boston paper. A widowed rancher in the Dakota Territory was seeking a wife, no family of her own, no prospects, and no future in the textile mill. Amelia had leaped at the chance. The letters had been brief but promising. His words were firm, his promises generous. She hadn't imagined she'd be stepping into a prison. Samuel Harrington had greeted her with a cold smile and a house that reeked of old whiskey and broken dreams. What he lacked in kindness, he made up for in rules and rage. The bruises came, swiftly, first on her arm, then across her cheek. He called them corrections. The neighbors were too far to hear the shouts, and the townsfolk too fearful or indifferent to intervene. On a moonless night, less than a month into her new life, Amelia made her escape. She packed only what she could carry: her mother's brooch, a few coins hidden in the hem of her skirt, and a tattered map that pointed toward freedom. She boarded a freight wagon headed west under the pretense of visiting distant relatives, knowing full well she had no destination in mind, only a way. Now, as the stagecoach neared Fort Pierre, a small trading post nestled near the Missouri River, Amelia's heart pounded with both dread and hope. This was wild country Lakota land, and many whispered warnings about it back east. But anything was better than the man she'd left behind. When the stagecoach came to a stop, Amelia stepped down into the dust and sunlight. The town was bustling with traders, soldiers, and indigenous families. A few children ran barefoot across the wooden sidewalks, and the smell of roasted meat filled the air. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe. "Miss, you look lost," came a voice beside her. She turned to find a weathered older woman, wrapped in a shawl, watching her with kind but shrewd eyes. Amelia nodded, too overwhelmed to form words. The woman extended a hand. "Name's Maud. I run the boarding house, just down the street. You look like you could use a rest." Grateful, Amelia followed her. The room was small but clean, the bed soft, and for the first time in weeks, she slept without fear. Over the next few days, Amelia helped Maud with chores around the boarding house in exchange for room and board. She kept her story vague, though Maud didn't press. Still, she could sense the older woman knew more than she let on. Then came the day that would change everything. A group of Lakota men arrived in town, trading goods and exchanging news with the settlers. Among them was a man who stood taller than the rest, with sharp eyes and a quiet presence that commanded attention. He wore a bone choker around his neck, his long dark hair braided down his back. People stepped aside as he walked, not out of fear, but respect. "That's Chief Talk," Maud whispered from the porch. "He doesn't come into town often. His people mostly keep to the northern valleys." Amelia couldn't take her eyes off him. Something about the way he moved, silent, dignified, assured, stirred something deep within her. She didn't know why, but she felt seen for the first time in months. Their eyes met only once that day, but it was enough. She didn't know then that their paths would cross again, or that the man with the proud bearing and quiet strength would one day become her protector and more. But for now, Amelia simply watched the horizon and whispered a quiet prayer of thanks for the wind that had carried her away from cruelty, and for the uncertain promise of what lay ahead. The morning sun bathed the prairie town in gold as Amelia carried a basket of clean linens onto the porch. She moved slowly, her muscles still remembering the sting of Samuel's beatings. Each day that passed in Fort Pierre brought a little more healing, a little more clarity. Yet, deep down, she knew her safety was borrowed time. Men like Samuel didn't let go of what they considered theirs. Maud shuffled out behind her, cradling 2 mugs of chicory coffee. "Drink. You'll need your strength. There's talk the Lakota are camping by the river for a few days." She handed Amelia a mug and leaned on the railing. Amelia raised a brow. "Is that unusual?" "Very. Talk keeps his people away. From white settlements, mostly. When he does come, he watches more than he speaks." Amelia sipped her drink. "He seemed different. Not like the men I've known." Maud gave a small chuckle. "That's one way to put it. He's got scars of his own, make no mistake. Lost his wife during the smallpox years. They say he hasn't looked at another woman since." Amelia didn't know why that stirred something in her. Was it sympathy or something more selfish? She'd barely spoken a word to the man, but the memory of his eyes meeting hers lingered like the scent of summer rain. Later that afternoon, she walked to the market for some bread and dried beans. The town buzzed with the presence of the Lakota, their horses tied neatly near the saloon. Children gawked, and some men watched with narrowed eyes, but no one dared stir trouble. A quiet respect or fear held over the crowd. Amelia turned a corner and nearly collided with him. Chief Talk stood just inches away. He didn't step back. He didn't flinch. His gaze met hers again, deep and unwavering. The way one might study a storm on the horizon. "I'm sorry," Amelia murmured, lowering her eyes. "You are not from this place," he said softly, his English measured but clear. "No, I'm not," she admitted. He paused. "Then you must learn where it is safe to walk. Not all eyes here are kind." Her heart thudded. Was that a warning? "I can take care of myself," she replied, too quickly. A faint flicker of something amusement touched his lips. "Even those who believe that most are often wrong." He stepped aside and continued on his way, leaving Amelia rooted to the spot. She barely remembered to buy her supplies. Her mind replayed the exchange over and over, every word, every look. What had he seen in her? Did he recognize the fear she tried to hide? Or had she imagined the concern in his voice? That evening, Maud lit the oil lamps and set a pot of stew on the stove. "You saw him, didn't you?" she asked, not looking up from her stirring. Amelia hesitated, then nodded. "Just for a moment." Maud smiled thinly. "He has a way of making those moments feel longer." They ate in silence. Outside, the wind began to rise, whispering through the grasslands. Somewhere out there, Samuel could still be hunting her trail. But here, in this quiet corner of the frontier, she felt the threads of her old life fraying, fading. She didn't dare dream of more than survival, but she couldn't deny it. For the first time since boarding that cursed train west, she felt something like curiosity, maybe even hope. She carried her candle upstairs, the stew warm in her belly and Talk's warning echoing in her mind. Not all eyes here are kind. And yet, his had been. The days passed with deceptive calm. The Lakota camp remained outside town, a temporary cluster of tipis by the river. Amelia often caught glimpses of Chief Talk from afar on horseback, speaking with elders, watching the town from a distance. He didn't return to speak with her again, but his presence lingered like a soft pressure in her chest. Inside Maud's boarding house, life carried on. Travelers came and went, drifters with sun-worn faces and stories that clung to them like dust. Amelia helped wash linens, cook simple meals, and keep the rooms tidy. She liked the rhythm of it. It was a quiet, domestic exile, but one she could endure. Until one morning, everything changed. Maud was pouring tea when she froze mid-motion, her eyes fixed on the window. Amelia followed her gaze. A man stood across the street, tall, broad, his hat tilted forward just enough to cast a shadow across his face, but not enough to hide the unmistakable scar above his left eye. Samuel. Amelia's breath left her body. He hadn't aged a day since she fled still. That same expression of simmering resentment, a man born angry at the world. But now he looked worse, leaner, hungrier, and full of something colder than fury. He wasn't just looking for her. He was hunting. "I've got a shotgun under the stairs," Maud said quietly. "I can't stay here," Amelia whispered. "You don't have to," Maud replied. "You're not alone out here, even if it feels like it." But Amelia didn't believe that, not yet. She knew men like Samuel. They didn't stop, they didn't forgive. She'd embarrassed him, defied him. Now he needed to prove something to himself, to the world. And she knew exactly how he'd do it. That night, she packed what little she had and slipped out the back door. She headed south, toward the river, toward the Lakota camp. The moon was high when she reached its pale light, shimmering on the water, dancing across the canvas of tipis and resting horses. She moved slowly, unsure, her footsteps barely crunching on the packed earth. She expected someone to stop her, to shout, to drive her off. But then a voice came from the shadows. "You should not have come alone." She turned to see him by a low fire, as though he had known she would come. "I had nowhere else," she said, her voice cracking. "He's here, the man I escaped. I thought, maybe I could warn you, that he might come here looking for me." Talk studied her. For a long moment, he gestured to the fire. "Sit." Amelia sank down, her hands trembling in her lap. The fire crackled between them. "Why did you not go to the soldiers? They'd give me back to him," she said bitterly. Or worse, say I belong to him. He was my husband. Talk's jaw clenched slightly. Many of your people think marriage is a kind of ownership. It was with him, she said. But I ran. I left everything. I came here because ... I remembered your eyes. You saw me that day. You saw the truth. He didn't deny it. After a long pause, he said, you may stay. For now, but if this man brings trouble, we will not run from it. Amelia felt something inside her loosen. Not safety, not yet. But a tether. A promise. I'm not afraid of him anymore, she said, more to herself than to him. You are, Talk replied gently, but you are tired of being afraid. That is a different thing. A woman appeared behind them and offered Amelia a blanket and a place to sleep beside the others. She accepted it gratefully, but as she lay beneath the stars, she didn't sleep. She stared at the constellations above and thought about fire, the kind that burns everything down and the kind that keeps you alive in the dark. Dawn came softly across the prairie, casting warm hues of orange and gold over the Lakota encampment. Amelia stirred under the blanket, blinking away sleep. For a moment, she forgot where she wasn't till the quiet voices of women preparing the morning meal and the gentle snort of horses reminded her she was no longer in town, no longer Maud's quiet border, and no longer hidden. She was here, exposed, but not alone. She sat up slowly, brushing her hair from her face. Across the camp, Talk stood with two young warriors near the river's edge. He didn't look at her, but he knew she was awake. An elder woman she'd been called brought Amelia a bowl of warm corn mush with dried berries. She said nothing, only nodded, and Amelia returned the gesture with a murmured thank you. The day unfolded slowly, but with a quiet tension in the air. Amelia stayed near the edge of the camp, careful not to intrude. She wasn't Lakota, and she didn't want to pretend she belonged. She had fled to them out of desperation, not expectation. By midday, Talk approached her. She noticed then just how silent his footsteps were. Come, he said. She followed him beyond the outer circle of the camp, up a small hill overlooking the town. From here, the buildings looked small and fragile against the vastness of the prairie. The river shimmered like a silver ribbon between the two worlds. He will not wait long, Talk said, finally. No, Amelia agreed. He doesn't wait for anything. If he sees I'm gone, he'll search until he finds me. And if he comes here, she hesitated. Then I'm sorry for bringing danger to your people. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. It is not danger you brought, it is truth. And you are not the first woman to run from a man who thinks he owns her. A lump rose in Amelia's throat. What will you do if he comes? Talk looked out over the land. We do not hide, and we do not harm without cause. But if he brings violence, we meet it. Amelia swallowed. I don't want anyone else hurt. You cannot carry every burden, he said. Some things must break before they can be healed. She looked at him. Why are you helping me? Talk's eyes flicked toward hers, calm and steady. Because you asked, and because I see something in you that refuses to die. That deserves not just to survive but to live. The words struck deep. She turned away, her eyes wet. No man had ever spoken to her like that, as though her life had value not for what it could offer, but for what it was. That night, the camp remained unusually alert. The children were kept close, and the men sharpened their weapons not in panic, but in preparation. As the moon rose, Amelia sat near the fire, twisting the brooch from her mother between her fingers. Wien sat beside her without a word. After a moment, the older woman said, The spirits brought you here for a reason. Do not doubt your place, even when others try to erase it. Amelia looked at her. Do you think it's possible to start over? Even after everything. Wien smiled softly. You already have. A howl rose in the distance. Not a wolf. Amelia knew that sound. It was human. A cry of anger. Somewhere out there in the darkness, Samuel was close. She stood, every nerve in her body taut. Single quotes. Kia appeared beside her, a bow slung across his back. He is near. Then it begins, Amelia said, voice steady despite the fear crawling in her gut. Ken nodded once. Let him come. The fire crackled beside them, and Amelia felt the old fear rise again, but this time, it had no grip. She wasn't running anymore. She was standing still, and someone was standing beside her. The night was thick with tension, the air heavy and electric. The Lakota camp lay quiet, save for the low crackling of the fire and the distant calls of night birds. Amelia sat close to the warmth, her hands clenched tightly around the worn brooch. From her mother, a talisman she'd carried through the darkest moments, Tok stood at the edge of the camp. His silhouette sharp against the pale moonlight, his bow was ready, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the trees that bordered the camp. Minutes stretched into an hour. Then two, the silence almost unbearable. And then a rustling in the brush. A figure emerged, stumbling and wild-eyed, shotgun gripped tightly in his shaking hands. Samuel. Amelia's breath caught. She stood slowly, her gaze fixed on the man who had haunted her nightmares. His clothes were tattered, his face gaunt, but the same cruel fire burned in his eyes. "I found you," he spat. Tok stepped forward. His presence calm but commanding. "This is Lakota land," he said quietly. "You are not welcome here." Samuel laughed, bitter and ragged. "She's mine. She belongs to me." Amelia's chest tightened. "I belong to no one." Samuel's eyes flickered with rage. And he raised the shotgun. Tok's hand moved like lightning, his arrow soaring through the air with deadly precision. It struck the shotgun, knocking it from Samuel's grasp with a loud clang. The man staggered, disbelief and fury etched across his face. "Leave now," Tok said, voice low and deadly. Samuel, panting and defeated, scrambled backward into the shadows and disappeared. For a long moment, no one moved. Amelia sank back to the ground, tears streaming down her cheeks, not from fear, but relief. Tok sat beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "You are safe," he said. For the first time, she whispered. The dawn after the confrontation was quiet but charged with a sense of new beginnings. Amelia woke to the soft warmth of the morning sun filtering through the canvas of the tipi. For the first time in months, her body didn't ache with the weight of fear. Instead, there was a cautious hope blooming inside her. Tok was already awake, sitting outside, sharpening an arrow. His gaze lifted as she emerged, a small smile touching his lips. "You slept well," he said. Amelia nodded, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "I feel, different, lighter." He nodded thoughtfully. "When the storm passes, the earth is ready to grow again." Days passed as Amelia slowly learned the ways of the Lakota, their stories, their customs, the respect woven into every gesture. Tok was patient, never pushing, but always present. He taught her how to listen to the wind, to read the tracks of animals, to find strength in silence. One afternoon, as they sat by the river, Tok shared the story of his late wife, woman of fierce kindness and unyielding courage. Taken too soon by the smallpox that swept through their people. "She taught me what it means to love without possession," he said softly, "to honor, to protect, but never to own." Amelia's heart ached at the vulnerability in his voice. "I didn't know love could be that way." "It is the way it should be," he replied, as the weeks turned into months. Their friendship deepened into something neither dared name aloud, but in quiet moments, their hands would brush, their eyes would meet, and a spark ignited between them, a promise of something real. For Amelia, it was more than love, it was freedom, not just from Samuel but from the chains of her past. One evening, as stars blanketed the sky, Tok and Amelia sat by the fire, the world around them hushed. "Will you stay?" he asked. She looked into his eyes, seeing not just a chief, but a man who had saved her in more ways than one. "Yes," she said simply. And in that moment, beneath the endless prairie sky, two wounded souls began to heal together. The seasons shifted slowly, painting the plains in colors of gold, green, and white. Amelia found herself no longer a stranger in this land but part of a community that embraced her. Not as an outsider, but as family. The bond between her and Tok grew stronger with each passing day. Their love was quiet but unshakable, forged in shared stories, gentle touch, and the understanding that true connection is built on respect and freedom. One crisp autumn morning, as leaves swirled around them like a dance of fire and wind, Tok took Amelia's hand and led her to a clearing beneath the wide sky. There, surrounded by the people who had become her new family, he asked her to become his wife, not as possession, but as partner. Tears glistened in Amelia's eyes as she said yes, her heart full with the promise of a life built on trust, courage, and love. Their wedding was simple but beautiful, a ceremony that honored both Lakota traditions and the path Amelia had walked to reach this moment. Songs rose to the heavens, prayers whispered to the spirits of the land, and laughter echoed through the hills. Amelia looked out over the faces around her, the warriors, the women, the children, and knew she had found a place where she belonged. No longer a frightened mail order, bride fleeing cruelty, She was a woman reborn, standing tall beside a man who cherished her freedom as much as her heart. Together, they built a life rooted in respect and resilience, a testament to the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. And beneath the endless sky, where the prairie met the horizon, Amelia found her true home.